One is one of the same pieces of legislation I actually brought before the body last year. Of course, again, with timing and everything that happened last year, we're here sitting here again with the bill in front of us. The bill strictly deals in the regulations of when we're building pools and spas and such items. There's a lot of plumbing and electrical that is involved in that, and throughout the state, not just our state, but throughout the country, there's been many instances where let's just say something has gone wrong on the installation. Some of the companies, let's just say, do not follow certain codes, such items, and people's lives have actually been lost. I mean, I know any of you that have ever been out at a lake area or have lived on a lake or something like that, you've heard of the incidences where someone comes off of their dock onto the lake and they're electrocuted. Well, it's the same thing happens in pools. You could jump into your pool and still be electrocuted just from a default of someone not doing something correctly. But anyway, so I do want to mention, too, that in this legislation, there's an amendment that should come forth upon the passing of the legislation. If you see there's only one side to this, there will be a second side. I do have a copy of the amendment. If anyone would like to see it, I'd gladly give you guys copies of it. But what this does is it makes a level playing field across the industry here. So right now we have you'll hear from a witness that goes by a certain standard and a certain code. They do it the right way, they do it the correct way. That doesn't mean that there's not another way that's the right way and the correct way out there, and there does seem to be. So there seems to be two code books, regulation books that they want to follow. And I have brought, and when I mean by brought both sides to this, I've brought the private sector and the labor sector to the table on this, and they are both in agreement. Once we get that amendment on there, that throughout this state we've established a law and a guideline. It doesn't matter if Representative Smith wants to build a pool, as long as he goes by this guideline or this guideline, either one. And for that, Mr. Chairman, I will open myself up to the body and any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any questions for the representative from the committee this morning? Wake up, guys. Come on. No questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
See how perfect that is, Mr. Chairman?
Wonderful. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good morning.
We'll start with those here to testify in favor. When you're ready, and please be sure to fill out a witness form up front there.
And witness form is already filled out. My name is Rick Wammel. I'm the president of a company, Bi-State Pool and Spa in O'Fallon, Missouri. I'm a resident of Chesterfield, Missouri. I actually know Representative Hicks. His youngest son and my youngest son played soccer together, which is how we got to get this to become a bill. His wife was one of the coaches for my son as well on a club soccer team. The reason for this bill, I guess in 2008 and 2009, St. Louis County, they approached me to be part of a aquatic advisory board for coming up with a code for swimming pools. Since then, they have adopted this International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, along with 40 other municipalities, counties, et cetera, throughout the state of Missouri. What we're asking basically is for this to be a guideline for it to be adopted if the counties so choose within the entire state. So in other words, it be not a state mandate, but a state elective code. Just because when I was on the St. Louis County Aquatic Advisory Board, this is something that took us a year, 4 hours a week for a year we came together with the Red Cross, the YMCA's, hotels, school districts, subdivisions, et cetera, coming up with a code. Since then, they've adopted this code saying, hey, this is something that's adopted in several other states across the United States, and it just makes it more uniform to have a universal code across the United States. So with that, that's kind of the premise of the code, and I'll, again, open it up if anyone has questions for me. That's the nutshell of what the bill is asking this code to be adopted throughout the state.
Thank you very much. Do we have any, and thank you for making the trip up here this morning or last night.
There would have been more people, but yeah, the weather kind of caught us. So yes, thank you for hearing me.
Any questions from the committee this morning? Yeah, Representative Boggs.
To inquire.
Proceed.
So, couple questions come to mind. So, one of the questions that came up, I don't remember from last year. It was in a different committee last year, but I do remember this. Is one. So there's kind of two ways to go about this. So I guess where I would go with that is, let's just say houses are constantly moving on the market, and someone's already got one up and running, and it's on the with the property and so forth. And so we have an inspection. Will this affect that inspection, or will other pools be grandfathered in, or how will this apply to those? Is this just going forward, or is this?
I would think that this is only for new. So in other words, this would be for new bodies of water is what this would entail. So again, in most areas, and so in all the areas, I really don't have a horse in this game, guys. So I'm not familiar with what it would do in St. Louis, St. Charles County, where I build pools. We already adhere to this code. I do have a condominium at Lake of the Ozarks. That would be an area that doesn't have this. So what this is basically kind of preventing is and I know one of the written testimonies was from the National Alliance of Drowning Prevention, for instance, and they tell an example where someone didn't plumb a pool properly, and a child got stuck on a main drain, eviscerated her, pulled her intestines out through her anus, and throughout 16 different surgeries, and a year later, the child died. Things like Representative Hicks had talked about, whereas a pool's not bonded properly, and a person sticks her hand in there and gets electrocuted. So plumbing, things along those lines, electrical is what this is preventing. It's not telling, for instance, in Osage Beach, where I have a condominium, I don't think it's saying, hey, here's a code and you have to adopt this. I think they're saying, hey, here's a code that's kind of universal throughout the United States. If you guys are going to adopt one, we've already taken the legwork. We've taken all this stuff that all these, the best sciences and so forth, and this is one that we'd like you to adopt. And it can be with changes to it as well. I mean, if, for instance, if a county says, hey, we want you to test the water, and in the code it says once a day, and they say, hey, we want it tested 3 times a day, it can be modified and so forth. But this is just basically a guideline.
Okay, I think that answers my question. I'm a builder myself, and one of the things that frustrates me is rules changing constantly in the middle of the game, and whenever you've got a project ongoing, and then you get to a point where, because the world we're in now, no one wants to make that decision. No one wants to say, well, here's how it needs to be done. And so you get yourself. I've been in a 3-way battle before where no one would just say, okay, well, here's what I would expect. This right here. So whenever you said 2 ways, that kind of scared me a little bit, because there we have another one of those arguments of someone just saying, well, here's how I know that's the right way, but here's how I want it before you get to move along. So anyway, that just threw up a little bit of a red flag. So that's why I was a little curious. So
and to answer that question, every 3 years this code does evolve. They rewrite it every 3 years to just keep up with new innovations and stuff like that in the industry and different, I guess, concerns that have come up. So the last writing of it was in 2021.
Okay. And there again, that kind of back to my point is that's the part as a builder, that's the scary part, is we never seem to get everyone trained in the way of moving forward to what is right. It's like, and 4 different people come up, and then now you have 6 different ideas. So I'm a little concerned with that. I'm not saying I'm not for it, but it just brings up a real concern that even this isn't something that we're saying, hey, this has worked for 22 years. We want to move forward this way. Just the very fact that it's just been updated is also a yet one more concern with what we're doing. So anyway, that answers my question, but it also raises a concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Representative Baker,
To inquire, Mr. Chairman.
proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So the way I understand this reads is what they're saying is the county has to, or the municipality has to actually adopt a procedure saying we're going to regulate swimming pools, right? So this gives local control to where that this is just saying if you do set a policy regulating swimming pools, then you use this code as a baseline of where you start from. Is that correct?
Correct. And even if there's not, I guess, inspections, there's still a code involved. So it still gives a footprint or a a list of, hey, this is the way it should be done.
So there's no mandate for inspections in this bill. It's just saying that if the county adopts a policy regulating swimming pools, then this is the code you can use as a baseline. It doesn't even say you have to do inspections. It just says if you adopt a policy, this is your baseline. The other thing that I notice in here is that any update to the international code is not automatically brought into their procedure. Like they would have to adopt the new amendments by a vote at the county level or the city level before that would be changed, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, committee.
Is there anyone here to testify in opposition of the bill? All right, anyone else here in favor? Anyone here to testify for informational purposes? House Bill 1661? Seeing none. Do you have any closing statements you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I just want to say thank you for that. I just want to point out the one thing that Representative Baker just pointed out here. We're not trying to mandate anybody for anything. We're just trying to set the framework for something to be done safely. The inspections, things like that, purposely left out. We don't want the mandates on this. All we're trying to do is to bring everyone together in one bill safely. That's it. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. That will conclude our hearing on House Bill 1661. We're going to flip into executive session real quick here. And first up, I move that we, hold on a second. I move that House Resolution 3279 be voted to pass, and I have an amendment, NEM.01H. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. Okay, we have adopted the amendment, NEM.01H. I move that we roll that amendment into a committee substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, I now move that we adopt House Committee substitute for House Resolution 3279. Please call the roll.
Chair Greyer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Riggs. Representatives Barnes. Baker. Boggs. Cups. Beaton. Gunby. Johnson. Smith. Trent.
All right, by your vote of 7 aye, 0 no, we have passed House Resolution 3279. I now move that we do pass House Bill 2203. This is Representative Fitzwater's Fast Track Workforce Incentive Grant Program. Representative Fitzwater sends us regrets he couldn't be here this morning, had to go to St. Louis on some urgent business. He did ask that that we amend the bill, and the amendment that I'm going to offer here is essentially taking what the Senate just perfected, takes all of those changes and incorporates them into this bill here that we're considering. We did pass out kind of a summary sheet of what items that includes. And rather than me sitting here and reading through that list, I'm going to just take a quick pause and allow the committee to just sort of peruse that and see if there are any questions that arise in the process of looking through that. I'm going to go ahead and move. I have an amendment ending in .01H. Has been distributed and moved for its adoption. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. All right, we've adopted the amendment. I now move that we roll that into a committee sub, and I move for its passage. Please call the roll. Oh. All those in favor of adopting the committee substitute, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. We now have a committee substitute, and I move for its adoption or its passage. Please call the roll.
Chair Greer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Riggs. Representatives Barnes. Baker. Boggs. Cups. Deaton. Gunby. Johnson. Smith. Trent. Baker.
By your vote of 6 aye, 1 no, we have passed House Bill 2203, and that ends our executive session. We'll now move back into hearings, and we're going to go to House Bill 1860 by Representative Eggleston when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. For the record, State Rep Jay Eggleston from House District 2. I get to speak for all the good folks in Davies, DeKalb, Gentry, and Harrison counties in the great northwest part of our state here to present House Bill 1860. Used to be the phrase was good help is hard to find, and talking to a lot of the employers in my area, now the phrase is any help is hard to find. Definitely employment shortages. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but then this bill is going to address one of them. If this seems familiar, it's because we have discussed this for many years. Before most of you were here, Treasurer Fitzpatrick, which was then State Rep Fitzpatrick, had this bill in 2005 to index unemployment and tie how long someone can get unemployment benefits to whatever the unemployment rate was. At that time, passed out with 112 votes. And passed the Senate, was vetoed by Governor Nixon. We overrode the veto in the House and the Senate, but we overrode it in the House in, I think it was May, and then we overrode it in the Senate in the veto session, and somebody sued, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't do the overrides in that's two different sessions, even though it's the same year. So it got thrown out. Came back with it again in 2017, passed out with 100 votes then, but didn't make it all the way to the finish line. And then last year, you heard the same bill from Representative Shaw, passed out of the House with 101 votes, passed out of a Senate committee, got on the calendar, and then things happened and it didn't get done. So here we are again. The general gist of it, currently, if you qualify for getting an unemployment check, you can get that check up to 20 weeks, basically 5 months. Some states have decided they're going to index unemployment, and basically when jobs are plentiful and unemployment is low, reduce that amount down. When jobs are scarce and they're hard to get and unemployment is high, still keep it at a higher number. So this does an indexing from anywhere from 8 weeks to 20 weeks, depending on the unemployment rate. This is on the indexing part of the language of last year's bill. This is identical to where we left off in the Senate. This is what the Senate would have taken up on the indexing. I think that bill had some other unemployment or employment-related stuff tacked onto it. I've stripped that out. This is just the indexing portion. And that is House Bill 1860. Happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative. What questions do we have from the committee? Representative Baker.
To inquire quickly. Good morning, gentlemen. Is there any substantial changes from the last time?
No, like I said, there were some components that didn't have to do with indexing that I've taken out and stripped it down to the core purpose. But no, other than that, I believe it's identical.
I was supportive. I think it's a good bill, so thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Gumby.
To inquire. Good morning.
Morning.
Do you have any concerns about an uneven unemployment rate across the state? I mean, if, for instance, I was reading in some of the testimony that was submitted online the idea if you look at just the statewide unemployment rate, but if you're in an area where a factory would close and there aren't many options and that unemployment rate jumps up, and how that would affect those individuals.
I'd not heard that concern before, and I don't, I'd be happy to look at if there's any statistics on great differences in unemployment rates. I don't know if it's that significant between one range or another. Usually there's sort of national economy
Right.
issues that in general buoy unemployment throughout the state, and any differences from one region to another would probably be very slight. It would be my guess.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Is there anyone here to testify in favor?
Hi, I'm Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries Missouri. Happy to be here in support of this bill again this year. This is something that we supported when it went through the first time, and when you all voted to override the governor at the time's veto of this bill, we were supportive of that as well. It turned out there was really no provision that talked to when you could override a governor's veto, and that it couldn't be done in two separate steps. So the fact that you took the risk and did that, we thought it was going to be okay, but the Supreme Court said no. So we're back here again to try to recapture all of those pieces that were in there. This is one piece of the puzzle that was in House Bill 150 that passed, that was Lieutenant Governor now's bill. So we'd like to see, as you're going through and considering this bill on the floor, we'd like, and I think this is probably something that the sponsor may be open to, but I don't know. It'd be great if you could add some other things that are crucial to this system as well. The termination and severance fix that was in the original bill is pretty important. Missouri is an outlier in that. Even states like New York have fixed that to say that if you get a termination or severance package, then you don't get unemployment at the same time. That's important for the health of our fund because, if you're already getting the same pay you were getting before, if you have a 6-month severance or something, you can still draw unemployment during that period of time here in the state of Missouri, and you can't in other states. So we'd like for you to maybe take a look at the other parts that were in that bill and maybe some other things that would be good for unemployment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Anybody else here to testify in favor?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and other committee members. My name is Carol Mitchell on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We support this bill because it provides more solvency for the Unemployment Trust Fund while still providing sufficient weeks of unemployment benefits based on the rate of unemployment in the state.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Others in favor?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, James Harris, representing the Opportunity Solution Project, here to go on the record in support of 1860. I just wanted to add a few things to this. About 6 other states currently have this in place. And what they saw after the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009 was that these states, 6 states that had indexing, people re-entered the workforce twice as fast as states that did not have it. And why that's important is we know most people on unemployment wait until towards the last week or two before the benefit runs out before they re-enter the workforce. We also know statistically the longer one is unemployed, the less likely they are to re-enter the workforce. So this is kind of a good way when times are good to kind of push people back. Right now we have 100,000 unfilled jobs in the state of Missouri, and kind of another thing that's kind of important to keep in mind is the decline in our workforce participation over the last 20 years. In 2000, in Missouri, it was 70.4% of people who could work, working age, were working. As of 2020, that was 63%. And that's a disturbing trend. And so this is a bill that can you can talk about how it might help business and lower tax rates, but it's really to kind of help automatically move up and down to get people back into the workforce. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yes, Representative Boggs. Proceed.
Out of those 100,000 jobs, was you counting mine too?
What, sir?
Was you counting my jobs in
No,
that
sir.
in that number? Okay, because we've got some that's not been filled, and so I think just for the sake of the committee, I want to bring something into this that that has taken place in the hiring process. That is, people banging your door down for an application, and you schedule a interview, and they will not show up, and that's so frustrating because and I'm going to speak on my wife's behalf. She takes the time, has left here before to go home to meet with people because we have, I think, 6 slots right now that we can't fill. 6 slots out of 15, out of 20 some, leaves you under 15 workers, and which makes it really terrible. So what I've been doing research into is how we can hold those people accountable so the business can say, we had an interview and they didn't show up, because it is so frustrating when we take our time. We hold our time is valuable. You never get it back. And so whenever you go to meet with these people, because they don't tell you, hey, I'm not going to show up, they just don't show up. And so I think as if there's any way we can, and this may help that a lot, but if there's any way we can have some way to, and I don't want to be a tattletale, but I'm fed up with being the guy that's so anyway, I wanted the committee to know that this is a problem that's actually gotten a lot worse after January 1st. I don't know what happened then, but it is definitely I think we had 6 interviews in 1 week that did not show up.
I actually had a physician in St. Charles tell me that recently. It was a restaurateur who was having a hard time getting people in. He was cutting his hours back. And part of it is on some, I don't want to say all, but some will call and do that to then, while they're reapplying for their benefits, unemployment, to say, yes, I sought work, and they'll put someone's name. I applied, called restaurant X, spoke with individual Y, here's their phone number. And so there's actually a bill you might look at. Senator Koenig has, I believe it's SB 808, that would make some changes in the unemployment system on kind of updating what that search requirements are, so it's not just going to Google and typing job. There's a few more things that I would say, as we keep up with technology, you might take a look at.
Okay, very good. I'd be interested in looking at that. And you're right. It's the longer you're not working, even with this bad weather, we work outside, and if we'll take off a week. That startup day is a hard day sometimes, and so I get it, but there's got to be at this time in our point in our life, there needs to be all the right things in place to encourage people that they need to go to work. So anyway, I appreciate that. Appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Others to testify in favor of House Bill 1860? And I think we already did oppose. There's nobody here opposed, right? Anybody here to testify for informational purposes? All right, see no further witnesses. That concludes our hearing on House Bill 1860. Next, we're going to hear House Bill 2587 by Representative Riley. When you're ready, Representative.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alex Riley. I represent the 134th District, which covers parts of South and Central Springfield and Greene County. Thank you for allowing me to present House Bill 2587 to you this morning. This is the Regulatory Sandbox Act. And I've introduced this act in Missouri because for too many of our entrepreneurs and innovators, our state's regulatory burden crushes them before they even have a chance to get off the ground. To put the numbers into perspective, the most recent study that I could find was a study from 2017, and it identified 113,112 regulations that are imposed upon the citizens of the state of Missouri by just the state regulatory bodies. That doesn't even include the regulatory burden that's placed on our entrepreneurs and innovators by the federal government, as well as local municipalities and counties and things of that nature. And that is a extremely troubling number to me. And it really hurts our little guys the most. The big guys can afford to pay attorneys like me a lot of money to go through the regulatory codes and make sure that they're in compliance. But the little guys don't have those same resources. So the regulatory sandbox that I'm introducing to Missouri is one tool that can help mitigate some of the damage that those regulations impose on startups. And there are a few benefits to this, and here in a minute I'll describe exactly how it works because it is a little bit technical. But there are a few benefits. So first of all, it is designed to spur innovation and allow those entrepreneurs and innovators an opportunity to present their ideas into the marketplace to see if they work. There are consumer benefits as well because it allows the consumer to access new products and services that have the opportunity to improve their lives. Another thing that it could do is improve the overall regulatory system, because too often what happens is you have regulations that are sort of created in a vacuum, that they're trying to address these emerging technologies, but they don't always get it right. They don't always fit the exact nature of this new innovation, this new service. Is kind of like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So what this sandbox system does is it allows the regulators to observe these new innovations, to hopefully allow them to create regulations that make sense and that fit what they're really trying to do here. So here is how the sandbox works. So it creates a new office within the Department of Economic Development called the Regulatory Relief Office. And this would be the entity that would be charged with overseeing the sandbox and making sure that it's running effectively. And just to skip back a spot, what the sandbox does is it temporarily suspends the rules and regulations that would otherwise be in place for a new startup entity for a period of 2 years. So this entity can test their product, test their service, see if it works, see if it's something that the consumers like, see if it's something that would be profitable, and things of that nature. So jumping back forward, how it works is the innovator would apply to enter this regulatory sandbox to the Regulatory Relief Office. The Regulatory Relief Office, in turn, would send the application from the innovator to the applicable agency for review. So, for example, let's just say it's some type of agriculture product. That Relief Office would send that application to the Department of Agriculture to take a look at. The Agriculture Department would then have the opportunity to review that application, consider whether they think that this is a good idea, that this is something that we should allow the normal regulatory code to be suspended for this period of time. And if so, then that department would then recommend to the Regulatory Relief Office that the application be accepted. If the department recommended that it wouldn't be accepted, that they didn't think it would be a good idea, they could recommend that the Regulatory Relief Office deny the application, and under this structure that we have in place, that would end the application process. So if the agency did find favorable, if it did look on the idea, an application in a favorable way, they would then report back to the advisory. They would then send their report to a separate advisory committee. And that advisory committee is composed of a number of individuals. There would be a couple of appointees by the Speaker of the House, a couple of appointees by the President of the Senate. The Director of the Department of Economic Development would be on the committee. The Director of the Department of Commerce and Insurance would be on the committee, as well as the Attorney General and someone that the Attorney General designates to serve on the committee in his or her behalf. So that committee, if they agree with the agency and think it would be a good idea then they would in turn send their recommendation back to the Regulatory Relief Office to accept the application. And that Regulatory Relief Office would then accept the application, and the innovation or the innovator would have a period of about 2 years to test their product, test their service. There are some consumer protections still in place. So at any time, for any reason, if something goes awry, the Regulatory Relief Office has the ability to terminate that program. So you won't just have some bad actor that's able to continue to act for 2 years. If something is going off the rails, that can be shut down immediately. There are a number of other protections in place. If a product or service hurts somebody, the normal civil liability rules are still in place. That person could still sue the company. While the innovator is in the sandbox, the normal tax rules are still in place, so they would have to pay taxes and things of that nature still. So without going further into the details, which I can if the committee is interested, I would just point out, so this is similar to something that passed in Utah about a year ago. Other than Utah, there's no other state in the country that has a regulatory sandbox that would apply across all industries like ours does. There are a number of states around the country that have regulatory sandboxes for specific industries. So, for example, a lot of states have regulatory sandboxes for financial technology. So, for example, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Florida, North Carolina, Wyoming, West Virginia have sandboxes just for those industries. For insurance, Kentucky, Vermont, Utah, West Virginia, South Dakota have sandboxes for those industries. Utah and California have sandboxes for legal services. So the benefit here is we would be kind of in an unusual way for our state at the cutting edge of being able to offer a really innovative policy solution to boost our innovators, entrepreneurs, and people who want to develop their products here in Missouri. So that's why I've introduced the act here, and at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Questions from the committee? Representative Briggs.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill. I'm just kind of interested in the 100,000+, whatever, and we'll talk to you offline about the study and what hasn't been done to roll some of those back. Just kind of curious, you've got some pretty good timelines in here as far as response from the state. 5 business days, application, what have you. What happens if they don't do what they're supposed to? And in particular, I'm dealing with an agency, which shall go nameless, SHPO, that really likes to micromanage other people's business for months at a time. The feds turn stuff around in 30 days. They can't, or they won't. So what are the penalties in here if the state office isn't doing what it's supposed to do in statute?
You know, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. But if we don't have good penalty provisions to hold their feet to the fire, to make sure that they're complying with those deadlines, I'd certainly be interested in visiting with you on some ideas to put in place to make sure that we do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions from the committee? Representative Gumby.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was Googling regulatory sandbox last night, and I had just a couple of questions. Could there be instances where multiple agencies would be involved?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible.
And if that happens, and one agency says it's a go and another agency says it's not, who decides that?
My belief is the industry that says no would control. They have, to my understanding, and I'll correct this if I'm wrong, is they have more or less veto power.
But that's not spelled out in the legislation, I guess, or
if it's not, I'd be willing to visit with you about that to make that clear if that's a concern.
Yeah, I'm just, if you get multiple folks involved
Yeah.
and people aren't in agreement,
Yep,
who wins?
yep, fair question.
That was a question I had. And then the other thing I noticed, if you're getting rid of certain regulations, one of the things it says in here is that when the advisory committee meets, those public meetings, you can't, I guess they're private, they can't be sunshined. So I guess that's a concern too. If you're not having the same rules as everybody else, and then things are happening, but then we can't find out what happened.
Yeah, and I think one of my thoughts with that is you want to protect the innovators' ideas, and if you're able to put if everything, so that application process is very detailed. They have to disclose a lot of things in their application in order to enter the sandbox, and I think that there would be a concern that if you are able to open up all of that to the public, then you would be able to have some type of competitor see those ideas and perhaps take them for their own and use them for a competitive advantage. So I think that would be at least one reason why you wouldn't want to have all of that open to the public.
Okay. And then I had a question. So if they come in with fewer rules, regulations, at what point would the rules and regulations in place apply to them?
Yes. So as soon as that 2-year period ended, when they would then go into the market, then the normal rules would be in place. So this is designed to
keep extending that. I mean, I saw there was an extension.
Yeah, so you can extend it for a period of time if you need more than 2 years to continue to test out your product or service. There's an application process to extend that. But once you are ready to leave the sandbox and enter the market, then the normal rules would apply.
Okay, because I just wonder if they keep extending it and then there's no sunshine component, how long that can go, I guess.
Yeah, and
Is there a
is there a cap on the number of times you can extend?
We're 10 years in, and
that's a good question, and I can't remember off the top of my head on that either. I'll check, and if not, if that's a concern, then we can visit about that too.
okay. Okay, I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Representative Baker.
Inquiry, Mr.
Proceed.
Chairman. Thank you. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I like this idea. I really do, and interested in learning more about it. One question I had is, so there's a applicant fee, as I understand it, of $5,000 per application.
Yeah, so I'm gonna fix that. I think that fee is way too high. So that was something that came from some model legislation, but I don't like that fee being so high. So if the committee is interested in moving this bill forward, I'll be asking for an amendment to be offered, which will reduce that fee, because obviously one of the things that we're trying to do is reduce barriers to entry. And if you have a fee of $5,000, that's a pretty high fee just for an application fee.
Right, with no
guarantees that you're even going to be accepted. So I'm gonna offer something to change that fee structure to make sure that the application fee isn't cost prohibitive for people who would want to take advantage of the sandbox.
Yeah, that's just a concern I had because, again, with no guarantee that it's going to actually help you in the long run, it could get rejected and then you lose that.
I agree 100%.
Money. Or if it was something that you could recoup that if you lost, or if your application was rejected. I think there's some ideas maybe we can talk about later offline.
Agreed.
That was just one thing that I had. And then I think to answer Representative's question earlier, I think if you look on page 8, it talks about if an applicable agency rejects an application on a non-preliminary basis pursuant to subdivision 1, then the regulatory relief office shall not approve the application. So I think that may answer her question. But got more things that, maybe discuss on this later just to learn more about it with you. But
Yep.
I love the idea, as you well know, being the chair of downsizing state government. I'm always look to find ways that we can reduce burdensome regulation and red tape for businesses. I think that's good for everybody. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Representative Boggs. Proceed.
Could you tell a little bit more about the new government entity that's created? Just kind of a little bit of the layout of that. I like what you're doing here. Glad you got your voice back. And but could you expound on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so again, it's a new office that would be created within the Department of Economic Development called the Regulatory Relief Office. And again, the primary role of that office is to oversee this sandbox program. There are a couple of other things that the Regulatory Relief Office is tasked with doing, and you can find that in the early pages of the bill. So, for example, on page 3, they're tasked with reviewing state laws and regulations that could inhibit creation and success of new companies and industries, and they can provide recommendations on certain regulations that should be repealed. So they don't have the power to do that themselves, but they would have the ability to review those things, try and find things so they could help us identify red tape that's just crushing job creation and not really providing any sort of benefit. So that's another thing that they have the ability to do. Another thing that they're going to do under the statute is to create a website where the public and business owners and innovators would be able to comment on specific regulations that they think are harming them. So again, just providing another tool for us so we can find actual regulatory items that are really harming our job creators.
So they're not necessarily the enforcers. They are the information center for both sides. So let's just take, for instance, ag. You mentioned ag. So 2-year term, that's 2 tries in an ag year, because if it has anything to do with growth in summer, that's and if one of those years is a drought year, well, then that's just 1 try. Well, that brings 2 years of experience. And so a lot of people, you have these great ideas, and you fail. Many times those are picked up by someone else and actually gone with because it's just one little missing link, or one person isn't able to. And so that's what I wanted to make sure that they. Because to be economic development, for oversight, it's going to be a broad range of things. I mean, this state has got a lot of. So that's what I just want to make sure that as he spoke as downsizing government, we weren't creating yet another large, downsizing in one area, but yet. So I like the part of the eyes and the information. Just wanted to be real careful that we weren't creating yet another OSHA, if you will,
Yep, you and I are in agreement on that.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative, do you have any examples of real-world situations here in Missouri or elsewhere in the country where this, if it had been law, could have been tremendously helpful to a company or an industry?
I think there are a number of things that it could apply to. One example that is frequently talked about are ride-sharing programs like Uber and Lyft. I haven't done a deep enough dive into how those entities got started and their specific structures to know if that would have been a perfect fit. But that's one example that I've seen get thrown around fairly often.
Thanks. Any other questions from the committee members? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any here to testify in favor?
My name is Jared Meyer, and I'm Executive Director of Cicero Action, which is a nonprofit based in Austin, Texas, that advocates for entrepreneurial solutions to policy problems. And I wanted to just express our support for this bill. I think it, as Representative Riley said, would put Missouri at the front of where every other state is right now on regulatory sandboxes. But to show you that this is something that other states are looking at, right now, or yesterday evening actually, the Arizona House, by a vote of 39-20, just passed their regulatory sandbox expansion. They had had a limited industry-specific one before. They wanted to grow it because of early success. And I think Missouri has an even more unique chance of almost starting from zero, where you don't have a regulatory sandbox currently, and you can set up a program that will massively create an opportunity for new businesses to get needed regulatory relief. With that, I can go into a few of the questions that were brought up earlier. I can talk about the examples we've seen in other states and the research on this, but mostly just wanted to be a resource to the committee and express our support and with what Representative Riley is trying to do here.
Really appreciate that, and I would certainly be interested in hearing some of the information that you have on examples of other states that have had this in place, and what examples there are of how it's specifically helping, and also what regulations do you envision here in Missouri and that you've seen in other states? How, in what specific ways does it help? What regulations is it helping to alleviate, and red tape is it getting rid of?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, the first regulatory sandbox in the United States was created in 2018. So this is still very new. And in 2014 is when the UK created their financial technology sandbox. So that's been the most extensively studied. But even there, it's less than a decade old. So this is a new innovation that so far has been seen to be very promising. In the UK, for example, companies that were able to enter the sandbox went to market 40% faster. And in a comprehensive review of what happened to sandbox participants, they found that it reduced regulatory uncertainty. All the participants pointed out that as a major benefit along with investors, and it did increase the percent of venture investment that participants were able to get. So being able to prove your product is a huge selling point with investors, and I think that in Missouri, by doing this, when none of your neighboring states have comprehensive sandboxes, it can be assigned to the innovators here and throughout the country that Missouri is where we want you to build your business. You're welcome here. And what importantly on this design, there are real concerns that the vice chairman brought up that, maybe a department doesn't want to play ball, but no one can say that this will harm public safety because any department it's referred to has the veto power and the regulatory relief officer. This isn't a judicial hearing where it can be appealed. If he thinks this is, or he or she thinks this is going to harm public safety, they can deny it, and as long as the advisory board does not overrule them, that decision stands. So it's kind of, think of it as more of like the common sense rules where you're like, if the legislature, if you were full-time and you had all the time in the world, you could clean up Missouri's regulatory code. But right now, the legislature is very busy, and sometimes that takes months, years. This gets immediate relief so that jobs can start being created right now in Missouri.
Fascinating. Thank you. What questions do we have? Representative Baker.
Inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The more I hear about this, the more I like this idea, and I'm always one to be usually not in favor when it comes to picking winners and losers when incentives that the government's going to give money to, or tax incentives or whatever to certain companies. But I think this fixes a lot of that problem. Like we're saying, you're welcome here. We want businesses, new startups, and others here, but we're going to do it in a way where we just remove possibly burdensome regulations to be that incentive, which I think is a far better idea, in my opinion. But one thing you mentioned, that was just a statement, but one question I had that you mentioned, so other states that have already open this up in certain areas of industry are already saying this is working great and we want to expand this statewide. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. For example, Representative Riley brought up that Utah just passed theirs last year, and they've already had over 40 legal service applications for businesses that have been approved already. So this would be trying to think of different business models to get legal help to, let's say, lower income clients, or to make it easier so that, not as much in-person or costly legal advice. So, that's the kind of thing where the Utah Supreme Court was the one who reviewed it and thought, okay, these applicants seem to be fitting within the rules. They're still following licensing standards. Let's allow this and see if it continues to work out.
That's great. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Representative Riggs.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read all sorts of surveys across the country, age bracket, basically that Gen Z folks, 50% of them in a given survey want to work for themselves, and I say more power to them. and assuming that the application fee would be something south of $5,000. I actually have a student now, a business law student, who's looking at something in this space. Are you seeing something or a benefit to folks, younger people, that this would actually help?
I have not seen research on that, but I would assume that I have seen all the surveys that, you know, younger people want to work for themselves. They're more interested in entrepreneurship than, you know, my generation or even ones before. But importantly, also on the fee, as you said, I think it would help if it was lowered. Utah just came out and they officially set their fee at $0. So there was debate over how much, does the state want to cover the cost. A lot of this is existing personnel, but, it is time to review these applications, and they decided this is so worth it to signal to entrepreneurs that we want you to do business here that they set it at $0. So I think whatever Representative Riley comes up with on the fee structure, there is an argument for making it much lower than we thought before.
Yeah, any barriers we can eliminate, we should be doing that. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
So one of the things you mentioned was venture capital and the interest venture capital has in projects. And so I can see where if you can get to market faster, right, by being able to get rid of some of these burdensome regulations that aren't necessary, it could certainly incentivize these venture capital firms to focus more on Missouri and Missouri innovators, right, because they're going to get a return on their investment faster, right? So do you envision that this would help bring more venture capital money to the state?
I think so. Based on the research from other countries, I would assume that that's a very valid point to make. And additionally, because of Missouri going first, I think there are tremendous first mover advantages here. And as other states start adapting sandboxes, I know that it allows the office to recognize other states' sandboxes as well. Think of it as almost like the states that want jobs and are open to innovation. They're almost banding together in a way and saying like, hey, we can all grow together as many companies are looking for a new home in a different state. So I think there's a lot more to do. This doesn't fix every problem. The legislature still can continue its work on fixing regulatory reform, but I see this as much more effective than, let's say, a government website where business owners can post which regulations are harming them. This is a real-world way where you can see which ones that are on the books that maybe you weren't even aware of. The legislature should then look at in an annual package.
Very interesting. And it's another way that we could potentially incentivize economic development and spur innovation in the state without actually having to invest dollars in it. We do a lot of that and finding ways that, government spends a lot of money to try and attract businesses and retain businesses here. It certainly sounds like from the experience of other states and what we're talking about here that this could do exactly that for Missouri without a big spend. Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for the time.
Others in favor?
Good morning. Kara Corches on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry in support. We are all about removing barriers, to entry to market right now, especially in our innovation. We launched a Technology 2030 report this fall and found that Missouri is indeed an emerging technology hub. We already have a lot of great things right now in Missouri, whether that's our life sciences corridor on the eastern side of the state or the animal health corridor on the western side of the state. We have a lot of innovation going on, so we support any policies that are going to spur more innovation. And I think this one, as has been discussed, other states have done this. I believe last year Arizona passed a regulatory sandbox specifically in the fintech space, so that's financial technology, and they have seen a huge influx of innovation and entrepreneurs coming to their state. The reality is we are in a global competition for jobs, and so states like Arizona and Utah are our competitors. So we need to be making sure that Missouri is staying competitive, staying ahead of that curve, so hopefully we are the Midwest tech hub in the future. So with those reasons, happy to support and can take any questions.
Thank you very much for being here. Questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Briggs.
Inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of curious to know about your tech plan. I'm just trying to figure out, first mover advantage. Are you seeing any movement in other states in this regard, where there's any research or any case studies, anything where we can see a measurable outcome. We do this, we remove these barriers, these hidden taxes, if you will, to development. Is there anything out there in the literature that you can lay hands on?
So I don't know about the literature. What I can do at least is talk to some of our other state chambers that we work with, especially Utah and Arizona. We've had conversations with them about the regulatory sandbox that they've passed. I just don't know if they have the outcome data yet. Anecdotally, they've said it's very successful in driving innovation in the state, but I'm happy to talk with them and share whatever I learn.
Well, and from a venture capital standpoint, to the chair's point, I mean, California, East Coast, I mean, we're basically chump change out here compared to what those folks draw in. So if there's any way to move that forward, all for it. So I'd appreciate whatever you could get us.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Representative Boggs?
Maybe more of a comment than a question, if that's okay. But just thinking back over COVID, I think you can probably all of us can remember several times the president saying that they were going to lessen or remove some regulations during the time of crisis. And I remember my mind drifting to, so how important were these if this actually helps our economy to lessen these? And so, it's a great idea if it works then. It should make us step back and go, well, how important were these? Because, many times they go back and say these are safety issues, and whenever we see something's put into that column and it works, well, we use that for everything. And so I just want to echo that, just sitting here listening to everyone speak, that my mind went back to those moments, hearing those broadcasts of we are lessening regulations to yet free up the economy and help everyone to survive. And so I'm going to echo one more time. I think that's a great idea, what I'm hearing in the air. So thank you, Chairman.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Others here to testify in favor? All right, seeing none. Anybody here to testify in opposition? House Bill 2587.
Good morning, committee. My name is Michael Berg with the Missouri Sierra Club, representing our over 11,000 dues-paying members in the state. And we oppose this bill. We appreciate the goal of supporting innovation, but we've got problems with the basic concept and then some of the details. This would basically sanction some businesses to engage in illegal activities that other businesses have to obey the law for, which is kind of undermines the idea of impartial rule of law. And also you'd have a agency of the executive branch that would be, this would create the Regulatory Relief Office of the Department of Economic Development, overseeing, suspending rules and regulations and laws, which could create a constitutional problem with as the legislature has the authority for legislation. We're also worried, especially about some transparency issues. The entire program will be advised by an unelected 8-person committee that can meet in private and would be exempt from sunshine laws, as was discussed earlier. And there's no requirement of public notice, open attendance, minutes, and recorded votes. There's other problems of letting the public know about what is going on. The only consumers to be informed would be those few who consent to be subjects of demonstration products under the Act. And it's kind of a vague definition of what is an innovative product, which gives wide latitude to the Regulatory Release Office and then the Advisory Committee. And there's also kind of left vague what is and is not a competitor, because there's part of this that says a competitor can get a leg up in applying for exemption from certain regulations. So, it creates something where someone can just say, I'm a competitor, you know, because it's not always clear what is and is not a competitor. So there's a lot of vague definitions, and there's also a lot of sort of lack of transparency in the process. And so we oppose this bill.
Questions from the committee? Representative Baker.
To inquire.
Proceed.
So, on one of your objections, you're saying that it's unfair for business that maybe currently are abiding by a certain regulation, and then a new innovator comes in, and if this is implemented for 2 years, they may not have to abide by that same regulation. So you're saying it's unfair to that business who is currently abiding? Is that what your objection is?
It's both unfair, but broader. It's the concept of impartial rule of law, where everybody's under the same rules. This creates, I mean, that's what the word is. It's a sandbox. So you got a place, I guess that means someone can play in it, but it gives sort of a dual structure for some entities that others are not part of.
Sure. So would you say it's also unfair in your estimation if a certain industry, let's say agriculture, for instance, or maybe a automobile plant or something like that, if they were to get an incentive and other industries were not, would that be the same unfair advantage?
I mean, that's a different issue than this bill, but I think there's a difference between incentives and having a law that is not enforced.
I would disagree somewhat with that estimation, but what I'm trying to get at is that in some situations, it seems as though it would be allowed or be viewed as something that would not be unfair, but in this situation it is. But I'm just trying to get at the objection that you have with that unfair advantage. So thank you for your answer.
Other questions from the committee? So I'm curious. So one of the areas and industries that we have seen the most innovation come in is the energy industry, right? And getting closer to renewable energy, solar, wind power. Certainly, there's been tremendous progress made over the last couple of decades. And as I understand it, one of the Sierra Club's primary goals is to help in that development of those renewable resources and technologies. So I'm curious, when a bill like this seems to be positioned in a way that could help spur further innovation, and certainly technology around renewable resources I would think, be included in some of the ideas that might be presented as a result of this bill. It could further the development of those and the speed to market of some of those solutions, creating a better environment for us all faster. Why would the Sierra Club be opposed to that?
We are concerned about, again, this opaque process undermining environmental regulations. So this is the concern, and I think that spurring innovation should be done through the legislative process, and so that everybody's playing under the same rules.
Interesting. Any other comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Any other here opposed to House Bill 2587? Anyone here to speak in for informational purposes? Seeing none. All right, that closes our hearing on 2587. We will now move into hearing House Bill 2485 by Representative Knight. Whenever you're ready, gentlemen. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jeff Knight of the 129th Dallas and Laclede County here to present House Bill 2485 today. 2485 is kind of a win-win bill. While it eliminates some plastic waste out of our landfills, it also creates opportunity for some economic investments in our state. Whenever this bill, I do want the committee to know when this bill was filed, there was both great interest and concerns, and you will be receiving a committee sub and we are currently addressing those concerns and as many as we can address. But today I want to talk about some economic investment. 15 states have currently passed this advanced recycling, and a couple of examples of that investment within those states. In Tennessee, a company literally just announced a $250 million expansion. In Georgia, there is a site that they are investing $680 million in. So this process, not to take away from any of the other recyclers in our state, we encourage as much as we can, but this kind of goes beyond that. Not only just taking plastic bottles and milk jugs all the way down, this can take styrofoam, plastic wrappers, and through this process can get those back down and become a sellable plastic again, sold to, an example, Ray-Ban sunglasses can be made from recycled styrofoam in this process. So really what we're trying to do with this bill is just clarify and create some definitions that allow for some of these companies to come into our state. And we want to make the process more of a manufacturing process, actually separated from recycling, just to open the door for these industries in our state. And without saying any of the 7 syllable words in the bill, I'll open it up for any questions.
Any questions for the representative? Yeah, Representative Trent.
Just to quickly comment, appreciate the representative bringing this forward. I think we have seen over recent years where Missouri has sometimes lost out on economic opportunity because we weren't quick enough to update our regulatory framework. We weren't quick enough to embrace new technology. I'll be very interested to see all the testimony that is presented on this bill and different perspectives, but it seems like an issue specifically that we should be thinking about, and also an issue that we should be thinking about in a broader way. How do we bring cutting-edge technology and innovation and investment dollars into the state by being much more nimble and flexible with the state's overall regulatory environment? So thank you, gentlemen, for this bill.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee members? Yeah, Representative Fox. Proceed.
Yeah, I just heard you mention that there was maybe some people had some issue. Would you mind expanding on that just a touch?
So I found out anytime you say the word recycling, you're touching a lot of people across our state, and some people think you're stepping on toes in their industry. I don't feel that way at all. I think we're increasing the recycling method and without stepping on those toes. Like solid waste, for instance, is one part of that. Most advanced, like these advanced recycling plants that are in other states, they're not in the transportation of solid waste. They're going to separate themselves for that. That was one of the concerns. Nucor just came into the state of Missouri in metal. So they had concerns that we were separating them out of the equation. We're literally increasing the definition and clarifying statute to let this process be brought into the state.
So would you say probably to be fair, a fair assumption of their concerns was just be no one really wants competition. I mean that's just none of us want competition, but competition is good. But was that their main concerns is just that they was going to be?
They didn't want any of these definitions to affect their current regulation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments, questions from the committee? Representative Gumby.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Good morning. I'm curious what the operating permit requirements are. I mean, I have to get a permit to change the cabinets in my kitchen. And so...
You should move to Laclede County.
Yeah. Well, you just heard what happened with pools, so I'm just telling you, it's coming your way. And we likely all have plastic in our bodies in some fashion, which that's a thing. So I guess whenever you remove permit requirements and I hear the word chemicals in the same sentence, that's concerning to me. And I joke about permits in my kitchen remodel, but this is creating new chemical products, and there's no permits required for that. So that's a concern for me.
And again, I can't really speak for what the other states have done currently. Last week, we actually had witnesses in from Georgia and Washington, D.C. that have been working on this, and because of the weather last night, they could not make it today. But as far as, there is recycling, there's mechanical and there is chemical, and this is a chemical process.
Right, and that's why I think because of that, that's even more concerning that it is. And so I'm just going to express that as a concern for me.
Well, I mean, any process, especially chemical, would have concerns, but I think the concern of the chemical process that takes place in these landfills right now is probably whenever you can reproduce it instead of let it sit there and do the damage it does to the earth. I think it outweighs that.
Right, which I just believe that it would then require a permit, I guess, is my comment. So thank you.
Gentlemen, you mentioned some significant investment numbers there that have happened in other states. Do you anticipate that this could spur that kind of investment in our state?
Absolutely. I think, and the reason, going along with what the representative said about being innovative and being out in front, currently Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Illinois, and Iowa have passed this legislation. Tennessee has passed it. They've already got a company there, and they already have a company that is expanding in a $250 million expansion. So, and I don't want Missouri to miss out on those opportunities.
Thank you, gentlemen. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative. Are there anyone here to testify in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Ryan Rowden, representing the American Chemistry Council. Representative Knight alluded to the fact that the American Chemistry Council did have a couple of folks who were going to come here as experts to talk to you about this bill and this process. I'm going to be your expert today. I have submitted the testimony from ACC to the record. I have my own here. But just to talk a little bit about Representative Gunby's question about the process and the regulation. Currently in the state statute, there's not a lot of regulation regarding this. It's all in DNR's regulations. When you're going to make a $685 million investment in a place like Missouri to do this process, you need firm footing. And the companies that are behind this are nervous that if it's just regulation at DNR, those could change, and we would be left in the wind with a $685 million investment. So what we did was a lot of the process that we're talking about here in this bill were already exempted from the regulations at DNR. We're just taking that over to state statutes. And Representative Knight also alluded to the fact that there's a lot of interest in this bill from recyclers across the state. And honestly, to his credit, I had no idea either how popular this bill would be. But to his credit, we worked with Department of Natural Resources first. There's a lot of nuances in this particular section of law, and very established section of law that affects a lot of folks. And so we've done our best to try to work with those individuals, mechanical recyclers, metal scrap recyclers. The representative talked about Nucor and adding some stuff in for them. So I think for all intents and purposes, to the representative's point, this process is more of a manufacturing process, and I will go back to the chemical side of it. We used to send styrofoam, plastics that we would not recycle here in the United States. We'd send it to China. And they had a process there that essentially, in a tube without emissions, liquefies all those components back to their original feedstock. And what we want to do now is we want to do that in the United States. We saw that it makes a lot of sense. The representative said, he talked about some of the companies that have been investing. Here's some examples. Herbal Essence is one of the highest profile brands, and Procter & Gamble has announced a partnership with Eastman to produce 5 shampoo and conditioner bottles made from 50% certified recycled plastic. Wendy's just announced that they were switching from their paper-lined drink cups to all plastic cup made with 20% recycled plastics, thanks to advanced recycling. This line that the experts from ACC would not want me to leave out is, if Missouri became a hub for advanced recycling technologies and converted just 50% of the currently landfilled plastic feedstock in the state, it would generate nearly $250 million in economic output each year. So anyway, I obviously have put that testimony into the record, and I know a little bit about this, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Are there others here to testify in favor? House Bill 2485, when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty again from Associated Industries of Missouri. Also want to go on record in support of this bill. This is something that really, if you think about it, is kind of a regulatory jump ball. And should this be treated as manufacturing or should this be treated as a solid waste facility? And obviously it leans more toward the manufacturing side because what they're doing is taking something unusable and turning it into something usable. And that's what this bill essentially does, is take that jump ball, send it over to say, no, we're not going to treat them like we would a solid waste facility. It actually takes and puts things into landfill. It's my understanding in the committee sub that you'll see, and that we're still developing, I think, that we hope to address the concerns that have been raised by others. We have recyclers in our membership as well. They're concerned in making sure that we don't give a leg up to a new type of recycling that's not there for current recyclers, and we want to make sure that that is protected. So we'll be working with the sponsors as we go forward, but we think this is a really good new industry, and we think that this would help our regulations kind of catch up with the current economy, and something that we can do to help really improve the environment, because we're not taking these things and allowing them to just go to the landfill. And one of the key concerns was making sure that the feedstock that we get in these facilities would be something that doesn't have to be sorted again, or if it is sorted, there'd be very little left over that would be going to the facility, that would be going to a landfill. Making sure that you aren't treating people that do that on a larger scale with all different kinds of feedstock, that you're not allowing unfair competition. So we're working through that too. I think we've got some good language that you will be seeing in the near future, Mr. Chairman, that will address those concerns. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there others here to testify in favor?
Kara Cortez on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I think it ties really nicely to the bill that we just heard and I testified on. It's all about embracing new technology and removing some regulatory burdens to hopefully leverage investment and economic development opportunities in the state. So we're happy to support, can take any questions.
Thank you, Kara. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there others here to testify in favor? Are there any here to testify in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Trent Ford. I'm with the Mid-America chapter of ISRI. ISRI is the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. Here in very light opposition, we would prefer on that list of on the pass out I gave, there are 4 different items that we have at the bottom of the page and on the other side that we find confusing, as far as the advanced recycling conversion, which is advanced chemical recycling. And the confusion with the recovered feedstock. Does the bill intend to give chemical conversion processes a solid waste exemption for the energy recovery? These, when they go through the chemical conversions, a lot of the times it's 3 different things that come from those plastics. It'll be different kinds of polymers, wax, and oftentimes in diesel fuel. So that is why they're concerned with how this does with fuel conversion for burning of a raw material. Because the idea of recycling is actually that the product is remade all the time. This one puts a little zinger on it where it's also used as fuel. And we just like some what am I trying to say? We like something more specific to read, to put into the language. The last thing is the term recycled plastics and recycled content. And you can read those bullet points. For whatever reason, recycled plastics and recycled content are supposed to be synonymous. Now, I don't know in what world they're synonymous, because content is simply, recycled content would be something that has, you have a bottle that has a lid on it, or a bottle that has a, some kind of painting on it, or paper label or something like that. So the plastic is not actually in its purest form. It has content in it. But we don't know why this is the same as recycled plastics. I've had a really nice conversation with the ACC lobbyist. He's a great guy and everything else. And I think we can get some of these things worked out. But this is a big bill. It's got definitions in it that none of us have ever seen before. And I'm really concerned about how those definitions affect all other recycling. We have plastic recycling we have a division of plastic recycling. Some of the people really like this because they can see this is the game changer, will help clean our oceans, get the plastic out and everything else. We have other ones, like the representative said before, Representative Boggs, that said, is this merely a competition thing? Well, it is when the advanced recycling, the advanced chemical recycling, actually becomes fuel. Whoa, it just messed up. I apologize. I've lost my train of thought on that. I think I can stop there probably better at this point. If there are any questions, I kind of like Ryan, I know a lot about this, and I feel like I was just vomiting it all out in one shot. So I apologize for that. And I'd be very happy to come by and talk to you about this, because it is. This is a complex issue. And this would be one normally I'd see, and I know the ACC people don't do anything else, but this is interim committee stuff, because it is deep. This is a 20-page bill how it is, with definitions no one in this committee has seen before this year. That's all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is ISRI, that's a national organization, is that right? Okay. And have you all seen bills similar or identical to this one?
All over the United States.
Okay. And in those other states where they have been passed, have you seen a detrimental effect or impact on?
Not that I know of right now. This has just started since, 17, I think, is the first ones that popped up. So we just got a couple of years into it.
But even though they've passed similar language or identical language in other states,
well, the language is different for the state of Missouri. For instance, we had never seen the recycled content language. That's brand new to the state of Missouri.
Okay, so there are some differences there and those differences are what you're speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we were supposed to have the same thing, and we ran into the same thing ACC ran into, which was our people in Washington wanted to come here to look at these, to further explain this, because it's really a deep dive. I would not be far off to say ACC probably bring a chemist with him. I have a BA in history, by the way. Chemistry, and those kind of people that really know what they're talking about with this.
Understood. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Representative Johnson.
To inquire, Chairman.
Proceed.
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you. Quick question. Is there any situations that you personally know of or that you've had a chance to research where these type of facilities have, in the process of burning the plastics, are there any like cancerous, any toxins that could be harmful to the employees and also to the surrounding area?
Sure, I mean, these are chemicals you're talking about, so you always have to be careful of something like that. That's not the biggest thing right now. The facilities they have, and the one that they're really trying for in Macon, Georgia, is a $680 million facility. I mean, the thing is huge. But lately, as of last month, the mayor of Macon has said he doesn't want to give the bonds, the $500 million in bonds, to the company because he is scared of the ecological and how it's going to affect, the workers there and the client, so.
Well, to me, I mean, if that isn't a real issue, and I'd like to, I probably will personally research that myself, but if it is not, and we can get those type of investments here in Missouri, I'm all for it.
There's not a recycler that wouldn't want this to work.
Right.
The problem is it's worked in the laboratory setting. It works fantastic. You get it up to industrial scale, and they've had some problems.
Thank you.
Representative Box.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Sorry you lost your train of thought there.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, just welcome. That's nothing to be ashamed of. I do that quite often. But so I want to kind of piggyback off what was just said here, because when we talk about the manufacturing, we're talking about recycling. So this product has been made once already, right? So we've had the pollutions, if you will, or those things have to be addressed once already. So so whenever you're saying the lids and different things, are you saying because whenever it's processed the first time, all these components are separate, like each individual, from the paint or ink or whatever, and it's applied. So when we recycle, we don't have the opportunity to suck the ink off, if for lack of a better term.
Right.
Just so
that's where the definition for recycled content comes, because it's not as pure as the plastic itself.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that answers that question, and then whenever you think of the other answer as far as what I was,
I'm going straight to your office, man,
because because I know we do raise up some eyebrows whenever we talk about starting to create competition, especially unfair competition, and I don't want to be in the in that field of being the one that's deciding up here who gets to move forward and who doesn't.
And that's part of it. That and probably where I started to gape at your question was competition is not a big part of it. It is a level playing field, because what you're going to have, and the bill does it, all the environmental controls are taken out that still will be with other plastic recyclers. So they believe they have an unfair advantage towards the chemical recycling of these big facilities. I can't imagine anybody who wouldn't want this to work. Will it work?
Yeah.
Will it pay? Will it be enough to pay it off? And that's what these towns that are building these things, or states or anything else that are trying to give money, like to find out.
So that's.
I don't want to be the guinea pig.
Well, no, and but everyone is. I mean, that's part of industry, is just being the first guy to stick their neck out is always.
And we have 50 states that are petri dishes for this.
Yeah.
So we kind of just need to look at what happens in Indiana. I know they have a facility there, and they've had some just recent problems, but it's not overblown.
Yeah.
The one in Georgia now, it looks like a lobbying effort to get it or try to get them to get that money together.
Yeah, and I had to appreciate, you saying that you have very light opposition.
Yeah.
That sounds like something that could be worked on.
We
Fixed.
can work this out.
So
And
great.
we have sent let's be honest, this has all happened in Washington, D.C. These different entities are battling each other, and they're giving Ryan and I, the lobbyist on the other side, and I don't even think he's on the other side, but they're giving us this fight. It's between us for whatever reason when it's actually on the East Coast.
Well, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very
We
much.
want to work with them. And
Okay.
you.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Anybody else here to testify in opposition? Doesn't
Yeah,
sound like
now it is.
There you go.
All right, good morning, committee. I was testified on the other bill. Name's Michael Berg with the Missouri Sierra Club, and I really appreciate testimony from the gentleman earlier from ISRI, and he brought up some good points that, if you look at the history of this technology, it has good potential, but the majority of projects that have been slated to begin have not been operational, and of the few that have been operational, there's just not a lot of actual recycling going on. What mostly happens is conversion of plastic into fuels, diesel fuels, and pellets that are used for cement kilns, and that's not recycling, and it's not of environmental benefit. There are health risks from the toxics that are created, and we need to be on the alert for them. And we also what ends up happening is when these things get burned, carbon that was sequestered goes in the atmosphere. So you end up creating more of a climate change issue. So that's kind of a broader issue with the industry and the worry that you could get something coming in and it never goes online, which is, especially if there was incentives, that's a problem. And it's clear that obviously there's been discussions about the details. There's a committee substitute I'd be interested in seeing, but we want to make sure there's proper protections for the communities nearby. And I was looking at a bill in South Carolina that authorized the rules for opening up these types of chemical recycling, mostly turning plastic into fuels. They have a clear financial responsibility mechanism to meet possible environmental cleanup costs, and would like to see that in Missouri if this goes forward. And so I'm hoping someone from the DNR here is to talk. If not, like to hear later their thoughts on this.
Thank you, gentlemen. What questions do we have from the committee? Representative Baker.
To inquire.
Proceed.
So I've heard this several times from others too. So what's the big deal with converting plastic into diesel fuel?
Well, it burns, and I can get you a study that we have, because again, like the other gentleman said, I'm not a chemist, but I've been reading up some good scientific studies on this. It burns dirtier, and it's also just adding more. It's touting something as recycling while it's really.
So you just don't want it to be called recycling?
Well, it's not just that. It is. We have a plastic problem, and this is touted as a solution, and it's not a solution. Now, I hope that the technology matures and there can be better actual recycling, as the gentleman before was talking about. But if there's a process that is creating dirtier fuels,
so is it better for the plastic to end up in the landfill or as diesel fuel?
Probably to end up in the landfill, because then those are bad alternatives, but because it stays sequestered in the soil instead of going in the atmosphere.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions from the committee? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else here in opposition to House Bill 2485? Anyone here to testify for informational purposes?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Rich Aubuchon. I represent, along with Tom Rackers, Sunny Solid Waste. We're one of those that had concerns, and we didn't want to testify necessarily, but you raised a good question. We want to make sure that we approach that. So we're here for informational purposes, and we had a concern that I believe that the representative, the sponsor, will fix for us. And if you understand Missouri Solid Waste, it's either trash or it's not. So let's understand what that really means. If it's recyclable and it goes in that blue bucket that's outside, it's not trash. But if it goes in the other one over here, it is. And we're subject to all those rules and regulations if it's trash, right? We just want to make sure that if there is trash, solid waste, that it's handled by someone certified by the state of Missouri to do it, right? Makes sense. So not everything's recyclable, right? So if you're going to sort this stuff and figure it out, we just want to make sure that someone's complying with Missouri law. Pretty easy. But remember, it's either solid waste or it's not. They can do this today. So this is not breaking new ground. Pardon me, let me take a breath. It's not breaking new ground for the state of Missouri. What they're doing is something innovative. And it's because China stopped taking our trash, okay, and sorting it, and turning it back into recyclable products for us. This type of innovation isn't easy, and the reason that they're putting in statute, as much as anything, is because they want to make sure that their investment is solid. Do you understand that? So if they're going to put so much investment in the state of Missouri, they want something on the books that makes sure they can do it. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to comment on that because they wouldn't have to do this under the statute as it currently exists today. They can recycle without this bill. But they're coming to us asking for the permission and the encouragement of the state of Missouri to do so, addressing our concerns as solid waste haulers, that we have to comply with all these transfer permits, all this testing, when we handle trash, but not recyclables. So don't think of this as a concept that you should necessarily be against. If they're addressing our concerns and those who are in this industry today, so be it. I'm here for any other questions.
How would those concerns be addressed?
So, for instance, if you're doing a sorting facility, if you're doing trash, you have to have a permit, right? And that's the very section that we're addressing here. But if you're dealing with recycling, you don't have to do that. You can just put it on a field. And I would tell you that I've been legal counsel for the state of Missouri on one of these very cases when I represented DNR in Sedalia, Missouri, where they collected trash and put it on 10 acres of property right inside the city of Sedalia. They didn't need permits at all. They sorted the trash right there. But if we did that at our facility, we'd have to have a transfer station permit, right? We'd have to test everything that comes off, all the leachate, catch everything that comes out of there, make sure it's not toxic. But if you're a recycler, you don't have to do that. So there's a disparity in the law, period, when it comes to recycling. Recycling's not bad, right? But the fact is that when China stopped taking our waste to make it into something useful, we have to start creating an industry here to take that product. Otherwise, it goes in the trash, and I guarantee you, if you looked in that blue can, lift that lid, there's stuff in there that's not recyclable, right? It's full of water, full of waste. That stuff's not clean. And the fact is, that goes in the trash, it probably goes into a landfill just like it is. So if you don't do clean sorting, if you don't have that process to handle it, it just goes in the landfill anyway. And that's the frustration we're seeing right now. Landfills are pretty permanent deals, right? Like they don't just go away. And so we're not building a lot of them right now anyway. And there's only so much what's called headspace, in a facility like that. So, we want to make sure we're wise use of what we're doing. Can't necessarily look at these with a jaundiced eye, right? Because you want to make sure that industry is innovative. For us, we want to make sure that, they're not just skipping all the laws that we have to comply with. If they produce solid waste, so be it. We take it from them and put them in a solid waste facility. Not a problem. I believe our problem can be fixed.
Any other questions from the committee for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else here to testify for informational purposes on House Bill 2485? Seeing none, that concludes our hearing on House Bill 2485, and that concludes our committee meeting. Meeting adjourned.